on international human rights, just for the members. So we'll go through 3 to 4 rounds of questioning of the witnesses, and then we will at that time break to go in camera and come back for some committee business, as well as to talking about our next meetings, etc. So today we meet for a briefing on the situation in Iran. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would encourage all participants to mute their microphones when they're not speaking, address all comments through the chair. When you have about 30 seconds left in your questioning time, I'll signal you with this paper, just so for the witnesses and for even the members, everybody, that you're aware of that. Also, for interpretation purposes, for those that we have interpretation, you'll see a globe icon at the bottom of your screen, and you're able to pick English or French, or if you're bilingual, you could just leave it the way it is. So please, no screenshots or photos while we're going through our meeting. And now our witnesses for the 2 hours are the following, and we've just heard from them. They were setting up. Cameron Saga, he's and I apologize if I've mispronounced the name, representing the Association of Iranian Ex-Political Prisoners in Canada. And we've got representing the Iran Democratic Association President Shahram Golstaneh, and accompanied by Simin Borchi, an ex-political prisoner. So witnesses, you're going to have up to 6 minutes to make your opening remarks. We'll begin with Cameron. So I'll be timing you for about 6 minutes. So if you can start now, Cameron, and then the other witnesses can go thereafter. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to be in this meeting today. My name is Cameron Saga. I'm a resident of Vancouver, BC, and proud of citizen of Canada. The violation of human rights in Iran is a book of untold stories that pain the hearts of every human being. Iran's shameful record of human rights had awarded the Iranian regime as the #1 executor of the world per capita. The merciless judiciary system of the mullahs is responsible for the execution of more than 120,000, including juveniles, elderly, dual citizen, and pregnant women. I myself have spent part of my youth in Iran presence and have first-hand witnessed unimaginable brutalities. I was charged for reading the newspaper of the MEK, the group that was opposing the regime. We were a group of five people serving our mandatory 2 years military service in the summer of 1981. My so-called trial lasted about 3 minutes. No lawyer and no chance to defend myself. The face of the so-called judge, Fallahi, the sentence has become part of my permanent memory. Detainment, torture, and execution are, in fact, a way of survival of this regime. Allow me to refer to a few. The massacre of more than 30,000 political prisoners in the summer of 1988. In fact, Ebrahim Raisi, the leading presidential candidate in Iran, was part of the death committee responsible for the massacre, including my best friend Amiran Jadani and some of my relatives like Ahmad and Agha Muhammad Tasharrufi. Ali Younesi and Amir Hossein Muradi, 2 international award-winning students, were arrested in April 2020 and charged with a series of charges accusing them of violent acts. Amnesty International said, while detained in separate rooms, Ali Younesi and Amir Hossein Muradi have been sleeping on the floor and also at times detained alongside individuals accused of violent offenses. Amnesty believes they remain held in Section 209 to pressure them make forced confusion. More than 150 innocent protesters were killed in daylight by the regime guards in November of 2019. More than 4,500 were arrested, many of them still in prison. The protesters were protesting a sharp spike of fuel prices. Naveed Afkari, a 27-year-old gold medalist champion wrestler, executed in September 2020, accused of taking part in anti-government protests, a case that set off a campaign by international sports groups to demand clemency for the athlete. His brothers were also arrested and still in prison. Shooting down the Ukrainian passenger plane with IRGC's missiles, killing 176 people, including many Canadian citizens. It's worth noting that the Ontario Superior Court has ruled it an act of terrorism. More than 4,300 people have been executed in Iran during Rouhani's tenure. As of now, they include 118 women. The actual number of executions, and particularly the execution of women, is much higher. The clerical regime carries out most executions in secret and out of the public eye. I wish I had more time to draw a more detailed picture of the pain and misery that people of Iran have endured in the last 42 years. But I want to plead with you not to forget political prisoners in Iran. Mr. Arjang Dawoodi, a mechanical engineer from Texas, has been languished for 18 years in various Iranian jails without a single day of furlough. Dr. Saeed Masuri, Mr. Saeed Sangar, and the list goes on. Despite all these painful years, the future of Iran is as bright as a shining star. The dismay, discontent, and dissatisfaction of the people of Iran have reached an explosive level. The quest for freedom, peace, nuclear-free Iran, free election, gender equality, etc., is all embedded in the 10-point plan of Mrs. Rajavi, the president-elect of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, for a prosperous Iran. On behalf of thousands of Iranian Canadians, I urge the Canadian government and every single of you to support us for free Iran in as many ways as you may be able to. I thank you for the opportunity and look forward to answering your questions. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Mr. Saga, and now we'll hear from Mr. Golstanay and Ms. Borchi.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, honorable members of Parliament, honorable Chair. I want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to discuss such an important issue that has affected and will affect many people around the globe and in Canada. I want to thank the subcommittee and its former and current members for having a unified voice in promoting and defending human rights globally and most notably in Iran. Mr. Sankat talked about some of the issues. My colleague, Ms. Bucci, will talk about some of the issues about the heartbreaking situation of political prisoners and the Iranian prisons. I want to concentrate my remarks on two major issues. I cannot say how timely this session is to address these issues. First, the shooting down of the Ukrainian flight PS-752 by two IRGC missiles when 176 passengers, including 58 Canadians, lost lives and were killed. And second, the so-called Iran's presidential election. The events about the shooting down of the Ukrainian flight are so elaborated in various meetings, and I'm sure that you may have heard there were testimony by the families in front of the Transport Committee and many other forums. So I will not repeat those, but the families of the victims are devastated and all they want is justice. Justice before the compensation, and holding the Iranian leaders accountable for this, what the Ontario Superior Court of Justice called a deliberate act of terrorism. So I guess that's not too much to ask. Foreign Affairs Minister Mark Garneau called Iran's behavior regarding the flight PS752 unconscionable. We believe there is enough evidence to take Iran to the international courts. This is what we demand in Canada to do, in addition to designating IRGC as a terrorist entity. The next topic, and I will go very quickly, leave it to the question as an answer, but it's the Iran's sham presidential election on June 18, so just 3 days away. The overwhelming call for boycotting the election has reached to an unprecedented level in recent years. Large segments of society from all walks of life more and more call election in this regime sham and illegitimate. Mothers of martyrs of November 2019 uprising, families of executed and imprisoned political prisoners, including Iranian wrestling champion Navid Afkari's family, who was executed in 2020, they all called not only for boycotting the election, they said, "My vote is overthrow of this regime" publicly, chanting slogans such as "We won't vote anymore, for we have heard so many lies." And the people have not forgotten. Raisi is the mass murderer of 1988. Hardliner, reformer, the game is now over, have become so widespread that the social media is full of the messages of this kind. In a posting yesterday, a young man goes public and says to Raisi, the so-called frontrunner in the Iran's presidential election and handpick of Khamenei, "We know you are the mass murderer of 1988. I know I'm endangering my life for saying this. I'm ready for it. My only request is that when you want to hang me, use a silk rope." Another man tears down the posters of Khamenei and pleads to people to take care of his 2 kids if he is arrested and executed. The election in this regime is a farce, not only by my account or our account, now even by the so-called, those who have fell down of the favor of the regime, including former presidents or leaders of the very same regime who were involved in the mass atrocities. Raisi, as well as many other officials of this regime, are top picks for our Magnitsky sanctions. Professor Kotler's Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights published a report with the names of gross human rights abusers, including Raisi, and recommended for their inclusion on our sanctions list. Unfortunately, so far, Canada has not added a single individual on that list to its sanctioned list. And this is not what a responsible policy is. The minimum Canada can do is just doing that and designate IRGC as a terrorist entity. The Iranian people will soon decide their own fate, but Canada can and must play a role such as the one that we played in apartheid regime in South Africa, standing with the Iranian people in their quest for a democratic republic based on separation of religion and state, gender equality, abolition of death penalty, and a modern judiciary system that does abide by international law. This is what the people want. They are very same principles that are enshrined in NCRI President-elect Mrs. Rajabi's 10-point plan platform for future Iran. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we're going to move to the members for questions. In our first round, we will start with MP Sidhu from the Liberals for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being with us this evening. The Iranian presidential election is set to take place later this week, more precisely on June 18th. Since the last election in 2017, many things have changed in the Iranian political landscape. I know Mr. Golstani had mentioned this in his opening remarks, but I'm hoping to hear a little bit more on perspectives from Mr. Saga and Ms. Borchi in regards to telling us more about your perspective about the election and the various implications of the presidential election to this committee.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Sathu. In fact, see what happened, Iranian dictator regime is not like a classic dictator regime. It's a religious fascist government. They use every single way, every tactic in order to stay in power. And I believe, they played all the cards they had. Now people, they realize that there is nothing between these regime going to be solved. People realize more and more now. I can say more than 98% people boycott election, and they hate them. But unfortunately, they've been controlled by different kind of secret service. As I know, about 53 different organizations to oppress, to control people. And it was just this morning that my mom called. She's very old, about 80 something. She noticed because of her house is very close to airport. And this airport hardly is used now because they made another big airport in South Tehran. She said, you don't know how many passenger airlines are coming. See how much people boycott the regime election. They had to bring from other countries, like in Iraq or Hezbollah or their proxy from all around the region to bring it, and they stand on the line and say, oh yes, we have some people to vote out for us. Yeah, that's all I can say for now.
Thank you for that. And Ms. Borchi, do you have anything to add?
I'm here.
Yes, do you have anything to add in terms of the
I didn't hear the question. I didn't hear the question because it was disconnected. So
no problem. So the question was the Iranian presidential election is fast approaching on June 18th, and I just want to hear your perspective on the election, and a follow up to that would be the implications for Iran as an important regional actor. I know Mr. Saga mentioned the region quite briefly there as well.
Okay, first of all, Iranian people, they do not believe this is an election. This is a selection, because in any election, you should have few different parties. The people come out and they talk and they are new faces. But in Iran, it's not like that. It's supreme leader. Some people come and register. Most of the people they choose has to be 100% devoted to the supreme leader. And supreme leader choose among the candidates 4 or 5 or 6, and then they tell the people to choose from them. And all of these people who are candidates right now, they were in the government, and everybody knows about their corruption, their association with the oppression of the people. So to me and to millions of Iranians, this is not election, this is a selection, and everybody boycotting it. And people actually, ordinary people, go make a video message and put it in the internet and asking people not to participate, and we all have to put our head together and put our hands together and overthrow this government, because we did see so many corruption out of these 40 years. That's enough is enough.
And my next question, over the past few years, we have seen many occasions where peaceful protesters have taken the streets to express their opposition to the regime. The regime responded forcefully. What are the chances that such nationwide protests happen again in the near future? And did these protests have an impact on the regime itself? Mr. Sagag or Mr. Golestan or Ms. Burchi, the floor is open to whoever wants to comment.
Yeah, you talked about the prospect. Actually, it is very much what I would say, it's very much what is at play. basically, even in the past, since 2018, major protests, as you just alluded to, were held in Iran. The most violent one from the government perspective that killed 1,500 people was in November 2019. And even since then, many protests, like right up on the aftermath of downing of the Ukrainian flight, and every occasion, every day in Iran, about 200 to 300 protest rallies are taking place on economic issues, on social issues, on freedom of expression issues, on every aspect of life. So the prospect of change and nationwide uprising is very much on the horizon. Now, of course, the oppression of this regime, as Mr. Saqqa alluded to, is not a traditional dictatorial regime. It's a religious fascism, I call it, that uses all kinds of methods and tactics to oppress the people. So I would not personally expect like millions of people to come out, because it's impossible. But I would say organized resistance by the resistance units will bring the regime to its knees very soon. This is what the people, when people have openly challenged, and they are doing it every day. I mentioned a couple of them in my opening remarks, but those things, I wish we had the opportunity. I believe the members should have the opportunity. I was not sure actually whether even the video clips are accepted evidence or not, but I believe even if they are not, then it could be a collection of them given to the members so they know what's happening on the streets in Iran.
Thank you. And now we're going to move to MP Chu for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the witnesses attending today. I salute you and thank you for coming, and your courage and persistence. Hopefully, one day will pay off to see a freer, fair, and a country in Iran that respects justice and human rights. From another witness who couldn't make it today, we have the written testimony, and in there he mentioned recommendation. One of the recommendation is to make sure that we focus in Canada here about the intimidation of Canadian of Iranian descent, and also the interference of these Iranian dissidents in Canada. Can you speak, all three of you, can you speak briefly what your experience has been? Are these over-dramatized description, or is in fact true that there has been foreign countries like Iran intimidating Iranian dissidents? Let's start with Mr. Saga.
Yes, I can give you one sample. See, when they shoot down the Ukrainian airline, passenger airline, I went and attended to a ceremony because one of the Iranian in North Shore, he has a bakery, his wife and his daughter being killed in this shooting. Believe me, I said, you can do a lot, you can go after and complain and apply for court. He was hesitating. He said, I scared because, I'm going back and forth to see my parents or my relative, right? I mean, even though they are here, they still scared from Iranian regime. That's why, many even family members, they didn't take action because of the fear of this regime. Regarding, okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. Because of time, I would like to ask the same question of Ms. Borchi.
Yes. Yes, I can say Iranian who live here, when we see some people who are related to the regime or supported of the regime here, we can see them. Then I remember not too long ago, they had a religious ceremony in the downtown of Richmond Hill, I guess. And then people were chanting and asking them, you should not be having this ceremony here. And one of the people were saying, Agha means Khamenei, will know what to do with you, and SEPA, mean IRGC, know where you are. So we will take care of you. So when, for me, living, one time I was a political prisoner, now running from Iran, and I come all the way to other side of the world, and I see them right under my nose, and they are threatening us. This is really scary.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Gostane, is there anything substantial? Have you heard of cases that's been reported to Canadian authorities that's borne some fruits, protective of Canadian dissidents and whatever? Have you have anything to advise the subcommittee here?
Absolutely. There has been many cases actually, but what Mr. Saka said, and I am reiterating, when the victims are victimized twice I'm talking about the victims of the shooting down of the flight PS752, many of them actually have complained to the police and security services, and some of them actually also publicized and published the threatening phones, some from Iran and some from within Canada, asking them not to take any legal action. So you can imagine, when a victim like that, who has lost his wife or his daughter or their young child, is threatened in such a manner, you can imagine how important and how widespread this threat is. Of course, over the years, I had seen many cases who have reported to the authorities, and in many other cases, some of those have been originated from within Canada, some others, and I would say the majority, have been originated from outside Canada, but targeting individuals from within Canada. That includes actually people who have got their citizenship on a bogus claims and related to the Iranian regime, going to other countries and threatening people in various forms that we, as Mr. Saka said, or Ms. Bucci said, I'm sorry, we know where you are, we have your credentials, and we know how to deal with you. So this is very much serious.
Thank you, Mr. Saga. I mean, to be effective, a fear has to be substantiated. We have a written statement from the other witness who couldn't be here with us today that there has been kidnapping situations. You know, the regime has to have something to back up the fear. Do you recall any such incidents?
Yes, I do. For example, see, I am here for almost 32 years, but can you imagine they call my sister, she's in another city, Semnon city, and take her to interrogation by Secret Service and update about my information, like my phone number, my address, everything.
You got 30 seconds.
For last time, she gave the last number different, right? My phone number different. They said, no, this is his number. I mean, see how they try to keep this fear within Iran, even in abroad.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chu. And now we'll move to the block and MP Brunel Duceppe for 7 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being with us today. I would like to highlight your courage, your resiliency, the strength that you showed in being here today, and the study that we're doing is very important. My first question is for Mr. Verstani, and I apologize, Golestani, if I mispronounced your name. You're aware of what is going on in Iran right now. What is the situation of ethnic and religious minorities, specifically the Kurds and the Baluch? Why are they suffering more? And what is the situation of the Bahi and the other religious minorities. If you could just give us a summary, thank you. I apologize, I'm going to answer in English.
Okay. Actually, the ethnic minorities in Iran, especially the border provinces, like the Kurds, the Baluchis, and the Arabs, I would say, in Khuzestan province, they all suffer double discrimination. And that's why these provinces are among the poorest provinces in the country that have not seen any improvement in the past 42 years. Now, some of these people, just to have their end meets, basically, they have to do extremely difficult jobs or porting some fuel over the border just to have their basic necessities covered. And they called kulbar or suhtbar, means they are the porters of goods or the porters of fuel, like the Baluchis and the Kurds. And most often they are targeted, they are killed by the IRGC and the border guards. Knowing that they are the poor people, they have no other means to defend themselves. And that's why we had major uprising in Baluchistan, in Kurdish cities, against the whole situation. And that's why the regime is so afraid. You refer to the Baha'is case as we speak. Yesterday, I read another article, another news article, that another champion, a Baha'i motorcyclist champion, was sentenced to 8 years in prison. And this is typical. They don't have any rights for higher education, and their plight have been heard many times in this subcommittee and many other forums. So all the religious minorities and all the ethnic minorities, unfortunately, they suffer twice. One, because they live in Iran and every Iranian citizen suffers. Second, because they are in a minority group.
Merci beaucoup. J'aimerais...
Thank you. And Ms. Borchi now. Saying that women have equal rights, Iran is now part of the United Nations group on the rights of women. Can you talk about that, please?
Can you please say it in English one more time?
Est-ce que Madame Borchi...
Can you hear interpretation? Mr. Chair?
Coming
Yes,
through, or
I just put it on. I just put it on.
Ok, donc je recommence.
Okay, I'll ask my question again. And Mr. Chair, if you could restart my clock. There's no problem, it happens. I am also not great with technology, actually. Anyway, so what I was saying is that Iran claims that women have equal rights to men, and they now chair the United Nations Committee on the Status of Women. What do you think about that?
I am so saddened by hearing that Iran is a chair committee of the women rights in United Nations. Let me tell you about the women rights in Iran. First of all, we are second-hand citizens in Iran. We don't have allowing the woman to go out of the home or out of the country without the husband's approval. As a woman, if you have an adultery, we stoning to death, which is the man is exemption because they can have multiple wives. You cannot divorce, even the husband is beating you up, and you have a miserable life. And the children that you give birth to, it goes to your husband. And if the husband passed away, you as a mother cannot have your kids, but is the husband family, they can take care of your kids. So you telling me how the situation is in Iran. So I am so sad.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Ms. Borchi. Mr. Golestani, in your testimony, you talked to us about the Iranian champion who was condemned to death and who was executed. I would like to know what's the status of political prisoners now, especially with what we've seen. Everyone followed that case and was shocked what's going on with his family? What are people saying in Iran? And what is the status of political prisoners right now?
Yes, thank you. About Mr. Navid Afkari, who was a wrestling champion, actually the whole world rallied to save him, including Canada and many other places. And unfortunately, it fell on deaf ear by the Iranian regime because he became a symbol of resistance, and also he was participating in the uprising in 2018. And unfortunately, his two brothers were also arrested, and as said earlier, they are still in jail. Now, the rest of his family, including his very brave sister, Mrs. Elham Afkari, goes public despite being intimidated, arrested, harassed, and all type of physical and emotional trouble that she goes through. She goes public, and one of the slogans that she made just a couple of days ago was that my vote is to overthrow this regime, for they have killed my brother and my two other brothers are suffering. Indeed, in a response that I received personally from the Foreign Affairs Minister a while ago after the execution of Mr. Afkari, he said that Canada is pursuing the case of the two imprisoned brothers. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll move to Ms. McPherson for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would like to thank all of our witnesses for joining us today. I'm horrified by some of the testimony that you're sharing with us, and very saddened that you had to come and share this testimony with us. I'd like to start with the downing of Flight 752. Of course, I've spoken to some of you already about this, but many of you will know that Edmonton, Strathcona, and Edmonton as a community was disproportionately impacted by that terrible tragedy. And we've seen the government of Canada have a response, and we've seen what the Iranian government has failed to do. One of the questions that I have is in terms of supporting the families. What are the asks that the families have? What can we do right now to support families? In particular, I think of families that I have spoken to that have deep worries about the safety and the health of their family members who may still remain in Iran. If you could comment on that, perhaps.
Ms. McPherson, who are your questions geared towards?
To you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Sorry, I should have clarified that.
No, I'm sorry. I believe what we need to do is basically to listen to the voices of the families. The Association of the Families of the Victims have done many meetings and many requests to the Canadian government and elsewhere. Indeed, I would also stress on this one, many of the family members of the victims staged rallies in Iran when the Ukrainian and at the time people from Canada from the Transportation Safety Board went to Iran to investigate. They rallied in front of their delegation residents saying, we don't have any hope from the Iranian government, but we ask Ukraine and Canada to follow up our loved one's case in the international courts. I guess we have to hear that. Now, in your specific question, what can Canada do? This is one of the things, but of course, there are many things that Canada cannot do. We have offered, I believe, on a symbolic way, at least to some of the families to come take residency in Canada. I believe that's a good gesture. It will not resolve all of the problems for all of the families, unfortunately.
Of course. Well, and Mr. Golstana, I'm also wondering, I brought forward a unanimous consent motion into the House of Commons asking the government of Canada to condemn any threats that were being put to people in Canada. And you spoke about that a little bit. Would you like to provide an update or any additional information about that?
Yes, there were actually many of those audio tapes were made public. One, CBC actually published one. I believe that was an exclusive use, so I cannot use it, but it is on CBC's website, that one of the family members was phoned in from Iran, basically threatened not to take any action. In another occasion, it was Iran's foreign minister's audio tape that was revealed, Mr. Zarif, who in the West, many people think that he is a reformer. And he said, this case will not go anywhere because they knew it, they knew what they wanted to do, and I'm afraid that this will not go anywhere. Now, he tried to whitewash the whole regime, but unfortunately, this is not the only case. I mean, his department was also implicated in terrorist acts in other countries, including in Belgium. An Iranian diplomat, for the first time ever after the World War II, was condemned and convicted on terrorism charges to place a bomb on the gathering of hundreds of thousands of Iranians in Paris. And he was given the maximum sentence of 20 years with no chance of parole or appeal. So, and in Canada, many other, I know from my own city in Ottawa, a radio host who is done this, she was threatened by his brother, actually gun on the head of his brother from Iran, calling her to stop her work or to return back to Iran. Otherwise, her brother would be in danger. So these are the type of things that we see quite often.
Thank you. Ms. Borchese and Mr. Sagan, anything else that you'd like to add?
I would like to add, sorry, go ahead, please.
Sorry. I would like to bring to your attention, we as an Iranian wants to, the world listening to the people. We don't want to, postponing, having a appeasement policy, having, let's talk now, see how it goes. Because 40 years, all the country talk to these people and it gets worse and worse and worse. Mm-hmm. And to stop this, it's only firm and decisive action can. Condemning is good, but it does not, because they are very shameless people. They do not listen, and we have to take action.
Thank you. A stronger response, I think, is what you're requesting from us.
Yes.
Mr. Sekha?
Yeah, I just wanted to add the only policy that works is taking a firm policy, because up to now they use any other policy and they expand their power in the region, not only within Iran, in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Palestine, in Yemen. See, all people around Iran are suffering of this brutality of this regime. I believe there is a solution, there is a way. I believe Canadian government can do a lot.
Thank
by
you.
Taking it.
Thank you. We're moving into our second round of questions, and we're going to begin with the Liberals, and MP John McKay will be up next for 5 minutes.
I'm not quite sure who I should direct this question to, but it's long puzzled me as to what the benefit the Iranian government gets from shooting down a passenger jet. Can you take me through the thinking of this regime and what possible benefit they could have obtained by virtue of this immense tragedy?
Yes, I believe that's towards me. So I'll take you quickly. I'm not too sure, John, whether you have seen the investigative report of a Canadian investigator called Andre Milne about this tragedy and the technical issues that led him to believe, and he investigated this tragedy from day one. But coming to your question specifically, he actually argued, so this is not concrete, I would say, evidence, this is analysis per se, but they tried to use a human shield in order to avoid further intensification of conflict with the US. It was in the aftermath of the US drone killing Iranian General Soleimani, but instead of closing down the Iranian airspace and declaring it dangerous for passenger flights, they allowed this to happen. Now, Mr. Milne, that I can actually send that report. This is public report published in Vancouver in a weekly. I can send it to the subcommittee for distribution. And he has given it also to Ukrainian and Canadian authorities. So he feels that it was Iranian deliberate action. And that's why they asked every single passenger whether they had also a US citizenship. And there were a couple who had US citizenship. They were not on board. They told them that they are denied. So they did not, they wanted to use this passenger airline as a human shield in order to prove. At the beginning, they did not admit that they did it. They said it was an accident and it was due to US hostilities. So they wanted to use as a shield to protect themselves.
I must admit, I find that logic bizarre and almost incomprehensible to yank US passengers off a flight in order to shoot down non-US passengers and create a quote-unquote human shield. I don't quite get the thinking there, but since I only got a couple of minutes, I just thought I'd ask you to ask another thing that's puzzled me for quite a while. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm sorry. To elaborate on that, let me just bring you also to a couple of other examples. This is not the only one. It's unfortunate. And I'm not talking about general terrorism. I'm talking about specific action. Like when Iran bombed Iraqi Shiite imam, basically tombs. I mean, they are doing things that a normal person would hesitate to even elaborate how they can do this. Or when they placed a bomb in Mashhad, and this was revealed afterward, not by any opposition group or anything like that. Within their internal infighting, it became clear that was done by elements of the government in order to take advantage of others. And so this is not the first time they killed Christian priests and they blame it on the opposition. There are many things that cannot be easily explained to a non-suspecting, I would say, witness from outside world. And I totally agree with you. Yes, my 30 seconds is off.
Well, I thank you for that. And I see our chair has got a rather fast clock. So let me ask one last question. The diaspora community here seems to be not only very fractured, but elements of it are quite devious and contrary to the Canadian interests. So in the pathetic little amount of time that the chair has allocated to me, can you give me the 30 seconds on who and how the diaspora community is threatening the security of Canada?
Well, that's almost impossible to do within 30 seconds. As you said, it's not only Iranian diaspora, which is fractured, as you would say, but as Ms. Burchi said, we have to listen to what the Iranian people from inside the country, and I guess the Iranian diaspora are just a cut of the society from within Iran. Of course, that's why democracy is about. That's why we have to listen to various voices. But the threat of the Iranian diaspora is facing basically by the Iranian regime. It's more than a physical threat, I would say. It's influential, basically.
Thank you. Yeah, and I've let my clock only rolled over by about a minute there, John, but it's done that for all the members can be well assured that they've also had a slow running clock. We've got next up is MP Scott Reid for 5 minutes or so.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I personally think you're very fair to all of us. Based on our experience, I just wanted to ask a question that was raised by the issue of the expatriate community being fragmented. Iran itself is a remarkably diverse, heterogeneous country. There's multiple languages, some very large linguistic minorities, Azeris, Balukis, along with some other distinctions. To what degree is the Canadian diaspora community a reflection of that, or is it the case that it's primarily just one group from within that mixture?
Can I answer, or Ms. Burchi?
Sure,
or
please,
yes, okay.
Sorry, I can say, yes, there is a different fracture of like different ethnicity in Iran, but they all call themselves Iranian. And if something for Iran is everybody say, I give my life for Iran. The Baluch said, the Christians said, the Muslims said, the Kurds said, the Turks said. So yes, different language, different religion, but we all, gather around one pole, which is Iran. And yes, in opposition, there are different fractures too. I am from North, and Mr. Golestane maybe from West, and the other people, but we all consider ourselves as a Iranian, and we know our motherland need help. We want to be the voice of our motherland. They destroy our country. This was a fertile land, now is it deserted, and the people live in a destitute. And among putting all this stuff away, there are tens of thousands of people just sitting in a jail for questioning the government, and this is not acceptable. And when I'm living in Canada, I see I can talk to you so freely and express myself. I am thinking, why my country cannot? We have 3,000 years of history. So there are some religious people who are not religious, they are fascism, and they don't have any education. Here, when I go talk to the priest, they said they are studying in law and philosophy and this and that, but these people were not that. That's why we want to change, and people of Iran want to change.
Ms. Burchi, seeing as you've got the floor right now, maybe I can ask my next question to you. You and one of the other witnesses had made reference to the term, right in your first presentation, the term a religious fascist regime. To what degree, you're free to fill in what your meaning is there, but I want to ask this question. To what degree is the religious element used as a window dressing, as a way of legitimizing what the regime does?
Okay.
And to what degree are they sincere about their religious fervor?
Yes, they are. Whatever they interpret in Islam is not that. You see this picture?
Mm-hmm.
I hope everybody see. This girl, 13 years old, they arrested him. They said, they make up, if the girl is virgin, if we execute them, they go to heaven. We don't want these people go to heaven because they stand up in front of us. It was against us. So they raped this girl in order not to go to it. They want to play God. They, as a Muslim, is not the people who judge me, it's the God who judge my action. But for them, because they want to, teach other people who is the boss, they are even putting this. We have judges to execute their own kids. Everything they said, for example, hijab is mandatory. Everybody has to have. You Christian, you Muslim, you Jews, you whatever. You coming out of the house, you have to have and in the beginning, they were throwing acid to the face of the people. And now in Isfahan happened this. If you put it in the internet, you can see there are 7 or 8. Today, the head of the imam in the Friday prayer said it. And the next day, these 7 people was throwing acid in their face. That's why I'm saying they are fascism. They are not religious fascism. They are not religious people.
Okay, thank you.
Can I add something?
Please, yes.
Yeah, in fact, it's very hard to understand for Western people what kind of government they are when we say religious fascist government. In fact, there are something in their brain, right? They interpret this is the Islam. But if we study Islam, is not real Islam, is against Islam or against Christianity or against Jew. You know, whatever is their brain, they interpret. See, whatever they do is unbelievable. You have to study a lot, and then you notice, you know, what kind of government you're dealing with. Then you know what to do with these people. You know, our resistance, they study a lot, and they know them. That's why, you know, they make, you know, then 10-point plan, which is the best solution for future Iran. For sure, we're gonna face something big happen in Iran.
Thank you.
Very soon.
Thank you. That was thank you, MP Reid, with another longish 5 minutes that we had. So, moving to MP Brunel Duceppe for 5 minutes ish.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Golestani, you talked about the influence of Iran. I would like to know about the influence of Iran in Canada. How does this, or rather, are there any operations of Iran in Canada? And how does that happen if that is the case? Could you give us some information?
There are actually a lot of influence operation by the Iranian regime in Canada. And fortunately, there are so much evidence for it. Indeed, we produced the interview of when the Iranian embassy was here. The third consular or the cultural counselor of the embassy gave an interview in Iran that said, well, we have to infiltrate Canadian institutions and political institutions by the next generations of Iranian in Canada. That was part of the reason for the closure of embassy, among other things. But all I'm saying is that that was published, well publicized. Besides that, there was an article in the Toronto Sun a few years ago that the head of a Canadian think tank was offered $80,000 to produce a report against the Iranian main opposition, calling them cult or terrorists and things like that. He refused, but how many people did not refuse, we don't know. Coming to the current day, again, a few weeks ago, I read articles in the Global News website and the National Post about the Iranian and Hezbollah influence operations using Vancouver casinos to do money laundering. And a couple of years ago, it was another operation by the Ontario Provincial Police, who captured actually 5 Iranians involved in money laundering for political purposes. So there are many cases like that. We wish, and that's another reason I believe this committee has to reconvene, hopefully in the fall, to have a more detailed analysis on many aspects of the Iranian regime operations in Canada. And we would be more than happy to provide all of those evidence, and most of them actually by the Canadian researchers or law enforcement authorities, including the RCMP, the OPP, the Vancouver police, and things like that, ganging with some of the Chinese gang based on the latest reports on the money laundering, and influencing Canadian universities and political institutions that can be also easily followed up.
Donc, vous nous dites que c'est quand même...
So you're saying that there's money laundering going on at a large scale by the Iranian government here on Canadian soil. That's what you're saying. Okay, thank you. So, what did we miss regarding Iran? Why couldn't we make a change? Go ahead.
Okay, I believe the big miss was the whole notion that unfortunately has taken over our political system, generally speaking, that think that within Iranian regime, we can count on some so-called moderate elements. That unfortunately has proved to be counterproductive and futile. And it goes back many examples, but again, to give it a Canadian context, it goes back to the case of Zahra Kazemi, the Montreal photojournalist who was arrested, raped, tortured, and killed in Iran for just taking pictures in front of Evin prison of the families of political prisoners. Now, On the aftermath of that, unfortunately, what happened was that the Canadian government response was very weak, and we did not follow up true of even our own promises. So I remember having had a conversation with one of the released political prisoners at the time who said, right after the ordeal, the prison officials basically gathered all of the political prisoners and said, look, we killed a Canadian citizen. Now Canada is apologizing. Who do you think you are? We can kill you all and no one would care. This is not the message that we should send to the Iranian people. We should send to the Iranian people that we support their legitimate right for self-determination, to choose their own future, to support their resistance.
And quickly, what should the Canadian government do? What are your recommendations in the short term?
In the short term, and to be very practical, I believe that the House of Commons passed a resolution. The families of the Ukrainian flight want it, the Iranian community want it, and the Iranian people from within Iran called for it, is the designation of the IRGC as a terrorist entity that has its hand bloodied all over the world, including in Canada with this flight and many other places. So that's one thing that we can do and follow up on that promise. There are many other policy options to be firm and support the Iranian opposition. This is not feasible, I would say, by any sitting government to support one group versus another. I'm not talking about group, I'm talking about ideas that we support democracy, the way that we dealt with apartheid in South Africa. And this is not a far-fetched. Iran's today is way worse than apartheid of South Africa.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now we'll move to MP McPherson for 5 minutes-ish.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you again to our witnesses. I'm very interested. I have the role in this committee as asking the last questions, and I'm very interested in that line of questioning that we were just exploring. The idea of what Canada can do. What are the practical things, both short and long term, that you would like to see Canada do to help the people of Iran, to support a free Iranian people? So maybe what I would do is perhaps start with Mr. Sagan, and then we'll just pass it through each of you to just your final words on those things, those concrete steps that you would like Canada to take in the short and long term, please. Mr. Sagan.
Thank you for your question. Yes, thank you. I believe same as congressmen, congresswomen in USA, we can support the 10-point plan. This is a very big step toward freedom and democracy in Iran, and support Iranian people by recognizing them, or at least support the 10-point plan, which is really most advanced, idea, cover everything for future Iran.
Ms. Borshi? I do apologize if I'm saying your name incorrectly.
That's okay. That's okay. No, designating we all Iranian and even the country around us did hurt from the IRGC. The biggest and most important thing is put IRGC in a terrorist list, because when they are in that, their activity can be shortened. The money laundering that they do, they cannot do that, and the pressure that they can put it on the people is going to be less. The rest, people of Iran know what to do.
Before I go to Mr. Golstana, just Ms. Barshezi, could you tell me, you spoke a little bit about, we talked earlier on today about, Iran having a seat at in the Women's Status of Women Committee. We talked about the needs for women. I'm wondering if you could also just touch upon how Canada can support Iranian women. And the reason I ask that is we do have a feminist international assistance policy. We are developing a feminist foreign policy, and I think it's very important that this perspective becomes part of our study.
Yes. As an Iranian woman, I always look up to Mrs. Rajavi as almost 40 years. She is the front runner of freedom for women and speaking for the women's rights in Iran. You can, study their policy, talk to her, and the other Iranian group maybe they are active. You can see and talk to them, and we don't want anything out of ordinary. Anything Canadian accepted for themselves, they should be accepted for us too, as a Iranian woman. And when they are going to do, communication and going for the economic, consultation, they should remember always put human rights first. And human right abuse in Iran is enormous. And every walks of life, doesn't matter, educated, not educated, women, men, old, young, they all suffer from it. So we want this to be,
Acknowledged.
the top, acknowledged.
Thank you so much. And I guess I have just a few more seconds, but I would give the final word, if I could, to Mr. Golstana, just to finish off the meeting.
Sure. Thank you, Ms. McPherson. On the policy recommendation, or what Canada can do, or what basically even MPs or every individual or every one of you can do, it's taking a firm stance on Iran. Designating IRGC is one. Second, we have a tool here in Canada called Magnitsky sanctions. There are many human rights organizations. I only quoted one from Mr. Kotler, but there are many. And even the European Union, with having so much relations with Iran, they have 89 individuals on their list of human rights sanctions. And in Canada, we still don't have a single individual Iranian officials on the Magnitsky sanctions. And I'm just wondering why. We have people from Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, many other countries, not from Iran. And this is troubling to the people of Iran. And they say this is complicity.
Thank you, and thank you, MP McPherson. MP McPherson, we're going into a third round. We just have about, I would say, 8 to maximum 10 minutes. So I'm asking members to keep everything down to about 1.5, 2 minutes, and but to allow our witnesses maybe to conclude or make some closing remarks through their answers to your questions. So we will start with it's MP Zuberi. MP Zuberi.
I have unmuted. I'd like to thank everybody for being here and your courage in speaking to us. We all fully appreciate how challenging this is for you and your families. So we support and respect what you're doing fully. Thank you. We were on the topic of sanctions. I just wanted to enter, I believe, for the record, to my understanding, Canada currently has 41, we currently sanction 41 Iranian individuals and 161 entities under the Special Economics Act, and that sanctions 12 individuals and 10 entities. Not saying that this is sufficient in terms of curtailing human rights abuses from Iran. I'd like to give a moment to Ms. Borchi, please. Your introduction says that you were a political prisoner. If you're comfortable sharing with us, I'd like to give you the floor.
Sure. My name is Simin, as you know. I am a former political prisoner. I live in Bradford, Ontario, and I am a nurse. I want to share my ordeal and in the hands of Iran regime and IRGC. I was just 19. In the middle of the night, 8 men climbed to the wall of my house, find their way to my bedroom, put a gun on my head, and told me, "Don't move." And one of them told me to dress up and go with him. My brother was 1 year younger than me, and he said, "Where do you take my sister?" And he said, "Oh, you want to come?" He said, "Yes." And then they blindfold both of us and threw us in the back of the car and drove us away in front of my parents' eye. On that night, I stepped into the unknown world, the world that I could not believe that was existed. For a year and a half, I was witnessing the agony and the torture the prisoner authority inflicted on the people under their care. It was unimaginable and horrific, physical, emotional, psychological torture 24/7, such as lashing to the point that you lose your sole of the feet or sometimes finger. hanging you from the ceiling, electric shock, deprived from sleep, food, washroom, and humiliation. And the one that is special for us as a woman, as a young girl who not married, torture before execution. Nasrin Shojai was one of them.
Thank you for your courage. Thank you, MP Zuberi. Now we'll move to MP Chu for about 2.5 minutes.
Chair, I have discussed with MP Scott Reed that I will be also using his time as well. So for the next 5 minutes, I would like witnesses to comment on.
No, it's 2.5 minutes total for your party, and then we'll go to the block and then to
Fair enough.
MP McPherson.
By the way, thank you for doing a great job. I would like Mr. Gostani perhaps to comment on a news report several months ago that China has signed a $400 billion multiple decades oil for gas for tax for weapons deal with Iran. And what kind of implication it is? We know that sanction may work, but this seems to us Canadians that it's a way out of the sanction. Can you comment on that, please?
Yes, absolutely. This was devastating, but not unusual. I guess good people find good people, bad people find bad people. I guess that's a common theme, and this is happening, of course, with Iran, hanging up with China, and previously even on arms deal with North Korea. Many of the Iranian IRGC missiles are built upon Nudang-2 North Korean missiles with lots of expertise given to them and forth. And on China deal, this is a 25 years deal, as you mentioned, the worth of the money. But more than anything else, that to me, this is an analysis. Of course, the news reports are accurate, but the analysis perspective is that Iran wanted to use that as a leverage, even to its talk with the West and the US, that look, if you don't relieve sanctions, we have other backers. We can rely on China. We can rely on other countries. And that's why we have to convince even those, they are dictatorial. They are, as I said, even within Canada. Yes, I have 30 seconds. Within Canada, as I said, their money laundering operations was done based on the report of the old RCMP officer charged with this task with the Chinese help. So,
thank you. Thank you. With the remaining 10 seconds, I just want to thank all of you again for your courage and for your being here and tell us your story. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, MP Chu. And now we'll go to MP Brunel Duceppe.
Excuse me, just one moment, Mr. Chair, if I could just have your attention for 1 moment. I think the 2.5 minutes very, very short. So I know this is Mr. Brunel Duceppe's study, so I'll pass my time to him if that's all right.
Okay, thank you, MP McPherson. So 5 minutes or so to Mr. Brunel Duceppe. Thank you.
J'accepte avec plaisir.
I will accept that with pleasure, and I would thank my colleague for that. Mr. Golestani, we need to look at the Iranian propaganda. It's very clear. And what the government of Iran is saying is that suppressing sanctions will help the economy. So how do we examine that logic and that propaganda of the Iranian government?
Okay. Now, of course, Iran is claiming. Is the question continuing?
No. Allez-y.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, I was hearing in English. I'm sorry. So to this portion, of course, Iran is claiming that the sanctions are hurting people. And that's why they use this alibi to put pressure on the Western countries to remove the sanctions. Now, first of all, even the sanctions are not blanket sanctions. They are targeted sanctions. Even in the worst case scenarios, they are still targeted sanctions. But nevertheless, I give you a very practical examples. After the JCPOA, or the nuclear deal, was signed between Iran and the Western countries, $150 billion was given to the Iranian regime. Was the Iranian currency changed its value even for an iota? No. All those money was spent in improving the arsenal of Hezbollah, other terrorist entities in the region, the war in Yemen, in Iraq, and so forth. Unfortunately, not a single penny, and I'm not exaggerating on that. During these years after the JCPOA was signed, we had like earthquake in Western Iran, in Kermanshah. People are still living in shacks, in temporary shelters, while besides them, convoys of arms are going to Iraqi militias, and they say, look, we are still living in these shambles. Why the government is not supporting us? So the money, the solution for Iran is not economic. The solution is a political solution. And indeed, don't even quote me, the current presidential candidates in their debate, the so-called debate, every one of them accused another one that they embezzled billions of dollars. So this is not, again, this is very much public in the eyes. So the solution to Iran is not relieving sanctions, because, I'm sorry, sanctions relief goes to the pockets of the leaders, not to the poorest people in Iran. That's why we see the Baluchis, the Kurds, doing the most difficult jobs on earth to just pay for their basic necessities.
We hear this message often. Some people, and this is something that is said often, some people say that we accuse Iran of geopolitical terrorism beyond its borders because they are against American imperialism. What would you respond to those people who say that Iran is not a bad country? It's not a bad regime. It's just that they are against American imperialism.
That has been the case since the inception of the Iranian, this current regime in Iran. Indeed, when they executed many of the political activists in Iran in the 80s, they were burying them in the American flags, basically portraying that they are agents of the US imperialism and things like that, while everyone inside the country knew well that this has nothing to do with the foreign interference. I'm not, I guess this session does not allow me, and we don't have much time to go to the geopolitics of this, but purely from an Iranian internal perspective, this is only an alibi that Khomeini, the founder of the Islamic Republic, used to basically rally people in the region behind him, that we are anti-American, so you have to support us in our fight against imperialism. Has nothing to do in reality with the pluralistic views of the Iranian people.
Puis, selon vous,
And here we're at the International Human Rights Committee. What do you believe are the most urgent concerns for human rights in Iran right now?
The most important issues are the issues of political prisoners in Iran. Mr. Arjang Dawoodi, in his 70s, he has not seen, as Mr. Sarqa said, a single day of furlough in the past 18 years, and he is a graduate from Texas, and so many others like him. Atena Daimi, that Ms. Burchi probably referred, I don't know whether she referred to. She is in jail, and now the Iranian authorities ask her, okay, you just ask for a pardon and you can be released. And she said, no, if anyone has to apologize, it's you, not me. So this is the bravery of the Iranian people that we have to support, especially women. We have to recognize women are in the forefront of fight against fundamentalism and against this regime. And that's why all my colleagues refer to Mrs. Rajavi or other women activists. But this is why it's so important to recognize in Iran trying to be,
We just want to say thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for, this is on behalf of the committee members, the
Thank you.
MP Bernal Duceppe, on behalf of the committee members, the staff, the clerk, the analysts, the interpreters, everybody for your. We want to thank our witnesses for your testimony, for your courage, for your bravery to be able to share your stories with us and many of your recommendations. So we thank you very much for being before us here today. At this time, members, we are going to conclude this session, and we are going to move in camera to deal with some committee business. Again, thank you to our witnesses. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and merci beaucoup pour tout.
Thank you for everything.